Did the wife choose to secretly betray her husband with an old acquaintance? Today we narrate a tale featuring precisely such a plot. Enjoy the presentation. My wife was unfaithful to me and my mother backed her. Yesterday evening, my wife of 7 years decided to relax after our meal. She headed to the den to indulge in her preferred shows while I switched between watching the Spurs game and managing some planned tasks. Suddenly, I noticed she was drinking wine and had consumed 2 bottles by midnight. I went to see how she was and found her completely passed out on the couch. I tried to wake her, but her smartwatch vibrated and a message appeared. It said something like, "I can't do this, it would destroy my reputation." Driven by curiosity, I opened it and saw a conversation between my wife and a male friend. This man wasn't a close buddy, although we had played sports together for years and knew each other from our youth. We used to call him jacket holder because he often held our jackets when we were involved in scuffles as teenagers. I scrutinized the chat, and it seemed he reached out first unless she deleted some texts. There was significant flirting, but nothing conclusively proved infidelity. However, last night she got drunk and openly started seeking closeness with him. I was appalled. She said things like she had long wanted him, nobody would find out, and she was good at keeping secrets. I tried to explore more on her watch, but found no additional messages. I don't know the password to her phone. I put her in bed and sat in the kitchen, shocked, until I fell asleep. I woke up to leave for work around 5:30 a.m., but when I tried to get into my work van, I couldn't move forward. I went back inside, grabbed a bottle half filled with liquor and pills, and wandered down the deserted railroad track near our house. We live next to a substantial wooded area, and I've now walked about halfway through it. Currently, I'm sitting beneath a railway bridge, filled with rage. I don't want to talk to her. I can hardly bear to look at her after what I found out. It felt like a knife had stabbed through my heart. All my love for her seems gone. I want to cut all ties with her. If it were up to me, I'd never speak to her again. The part where she claimed she was proficient at keeping secrets really got to me. Who is she really? It's about deciding how much I'm willing to tolerate in this situation. Frankly, I no longer care. I've never felt so deceived and disgusted in my life. The truth is, I've invested so much in her, not just as a spouse but as a person. I truly loved her and thought our characters, and by extension, our union, reflected those of honorable people. Discovering her deceit makes me feel loathsome. I feel worse than before. The best way to describe it is like someone you looked up to, learned from, and respected turns out to be loathsome. It undermines your perception of yourself and who you are because you've adopted their principles and spent time with someone untrustworthy. I apologize for the digression. It's simply how I feel right now. Fortunately, the house we live in belongs to my parents, who moved to a retirement community 6 years ago. The house will come to me when they pass, ensuring my soon-to-be former wife has no claim to it. What should I do? I'm thinking of not saying anything and just expelling her. While walking, I considered asking my friend, who is a locksmith, to quietly change the locks today. I could fabricate a reason about the doors being defective. She won't be suspicious as long as I'm present. After he's done, I'll ask her to step outside to check something in the yard. As she does, I'll quickly lock the door behind her. It sounds childish, doesn't it? Yet I'm unsure of what else to do next. I am currently looking at a bottle, and it seems like my life is falling apart. Regarding that supposed friend, there's no doubt he was engaged in questionable behavior. I intend to confront him soon, not physically but by exposing his involvement on Wednesday, October 28th, after I compose my post and am in complete chaos. While I was upset, 2 dog walkers approached me, clearly concerned. I shared my troubles with them, and one advised me against drinking as it would only worsen my situation. I appreciate her counsel since I was on a path to self-destruction at that time. Consequently, I got rid of the vodka, reached out to a buddy, and he consented to have me over at his place for some downtime. He was at his job but gave me instructions to find the spare key. We live in a modest town with around 15,000 people, and his house wasn't too distant. Once I arrived, I chose his couch to sit and reflect. Throughout the morning, I got numerous texts and calls from my wife, inquiring about my location and the circumstances since my work van was seen in the driveway and I was nowhere to be found. I told her that there was an issue with the van's engine, so I hitched a ride to work, which she appeared to believe as her response was simply okay. When my friend returned from work at about 5, I revealed everything to him and asked for his advice. I also requested that he remain silent about the coat holder, as I didn't want my wife to know. At that moment, I resolved that I would address it later by exposing his actions, not through violence. Regarding those who believed he was innocent, he had made advances towards my wife, and the texts were overtly suggestive. I'm uncertain why he initially reached out to my wife. They hardly knew each other, yet the exchanges were provocatively playful from the outset. I believe they had met face to face, and the situation had escalated from that point. My friend suggested I keep things discreet and seek legal advice to evaluate my next steps, which I did today. He took me back home. Around 6 a.m., and I was utterly drained. The excitement of the entire event had worn off, leaving me fatigued. When I reached home, I was completely exhausted, and instantly my wife seemed suspicious, bombarding me with questions about my day. I questioned her intense curiosity, and she noted she had seen my flask and lunch bag in the front passenger seat, sensing that something was off. I was going to concoct a tale, but I was too tired to feign, so I admitted that indeed something was amiss. I disclosed that while putting her to bed last night, I noticed a message on her iWatch, read it, and discovered her unfaithfulness. She switched from a composed individual to a scared one in seconds. I confronted her, highlighting her solicitations for closeness with that individual, her claims of being adept at concealing secrets, and I read through all their exchanged texts. She started crying, and I left, heading upstairs to shower. When I came back, she was on the top stair, still crying, and began making justifications. She stated she was drunk, vulnerable, and had never acted this way before. She also insisted that he initiated the exchange and that it meant nothing. She claimed she had no intentions of pursuing anything, reflecting the views of others. However, she didn't try to blame me, probably knowing I would oust her if she did. I told her I wanted a divorce and asked her to leave the house within a month. I also informed her she would be moving to the spare bedroom. Since then, I've mostly ignored her, responding with grimaces and shaking my head when she starts to speak nonsensically. She spent the night in the spare room, and I have not talked or texted her today. If I'm lucky, she might have left by the time I return from work, but I doubt I'm that fortunate regarding her departure. I discussed the matter with my parents. My mom insisted that I shouldn't throw her out on the streets, as she and my wife are close. We've been married for nearly 11 years. My mom argued that it was just words and that we should handle it maturely, noting that my wife hadn't actually done anything. She sided with my wife's view over mine, which surprised me. I'm concerned that my mom's disagreement could complicate matters. It's my house when my parents pass away, and since I've not done anything wrong, I'm not the one moving out. This could potentially lead to a difficult situation. I've scheduled a meeting with a divorce lawyer for next week to consider my options. Until then, I intend to continue ignoring my soon-to-be ex-wife. I suspect she won't reveal anything further, and now I'll always be uncertain whether she was an excellent deceiver or simply trying to win his backing for a relationship. Today, November 16th, marks 20 days since the revelation of my wife's attempt at infidelity with a friend, and circumstances have become unbearable. I allowed her a month to move out, and she has occupied the spare room. Yet, it's evident she intends to stay, particularly after swaying my mother. She lacks alternative housing, but that's not my concern. I have consulted my divorce attorney multiple times and am in the midst of drafting a divorce petition and serving her the papers. Additionally, I've set up a new bank account and moved half the funds from our shared account. Tensions have escalated at home. The living room has become a sort of demilitarized zone, as we each retreat to our separate rooms most of the time. I've purposely stayed late at work to minimize contact with her. I've entirely ignored her presence, but I started implementing the 180 method, which advises being courteous yet somewhat aloof. It has enabled me to avoid feeling like a villain who neglects her existence. This was a mistaken tactic, and I felt guilty, as if I were the one at fault, which wasn't the case. The only deviation from the 180 method occurred last week when I found her crying on the bathroom floor. I helped her up and gave her a consoling hug, though it was more a gesture of comfort than a loving embrace. Sadly, I'm now so cautious around her that I wouldn't put it past her to have orchestrated that. This toxic atmosphere is warping my judgment, and she continually vows to do whatever is necessary to save our marriage and demonstrate it was merely a thoughtless error. I proposed a polygraph test. Though I have no intention of actually administering it, I was curious to see her response. She initially agreed, but later showed me her tablet, explaining the unreliability and the potential for false results due to anxiety, given her anxiety issues. I couldn't help but chuckle. It wasn't a normal chuckle, but turned into a childish giggle. Interestingly, she seems willing to do anything to preserve the marriage except undergo a polygraph, which is intriguing. Nevertheless, it's irrelevant now. As mentioned in my previous post, any affection I felt for her vanished upon reading those damaging texts. I no longer regard her as my soulmate or someone I could trust completely. I view her as refuse that needs to be removed before it pollutes everything. After I exposed the jacket holder to our circle of friends a few weeks ago, he has been the subject of gossip. It's clear he's lost all his friends among us and is now totally shunned. I attempted to contact him several times, but he didn't reply and eventually blocked my number. I feel no sympathy for that deceitful individual. I hope he finds it worthwhile. I've had numerous discussions with my mother about this issue, and during a heated dispute, I challenged her on her support for my wife. I demanded to know if she was hiding something from me. Did she expect us to live as roommates, acting as if nothing was wrong? It seemed absurd to me. My mother explained that she has always seen my wife as the daughter she never had but always wanted. My mother suffered the loss of a daughter before I was born, a loss that still affects her. Since my wife and I began dating, she has grown close to my mother, forming a strong bond, particularly as my wife lacks a family or many friends with demanding schedules. My mother believes it unfair to evict her, especially amid a pandemic. She suggested a compromise, recommending we reevaluate our situation in 3 to 4 months and consider marital therapy before deciding to separate. I'm hesitant to agree, as the thought of spending Christmas in the same house as my wife is distasteful. She always insists on doing things correctly, and it would certainly be a disaster. My father, meanwhile, is a subdued and reserved man. My mother's opinion has always carried more weight in our household. Several people have labeled me as self-centered and pampered because I don't own the house and shouldn't be making demands. Nevertheless, the situation has escalated to a point where my parents must choose between my wife and me. If pushed, I am ready to depart permanently. It's crucial for me to maintain my self-respect, and someone must uphold their commitments here. Should I decide to leave, a friend has kindly offered temporary accommodation until I am able to support myself. Exiting will mean cutting off all ties with my parents. They might view it as me deserting them without trying to solve the problems, but to me, it's them favoring someone who shattered my trust over their own son. Once I leave, the future remains unclear, with my wife staying in the house under my parents' care while I exit alone. Initially, after a year of marriage, my parents let us move into the house, framing it as a delayed wedding gift, though it was merely a discussion then. Their intention was always to vacate and have us take over. I've poured substantial funds into the property over time, although that's irrelevant now. I dream of abandoning everything and starting fresh elsewhere, yet I have no other destination. I've always lived in this town, it's all familiar to me. Am I being overly harsh? I'm poised to sever connections with my parents, yet I'm torn. Why must I lose everything and everyone? I've striven to be moral, believing in the virtue of good deeds. But I'm beginning to question that now. Maybe I'm not as righteous as I believed, and perhaps I deserve what's occurring. As of Wednesday, December 2nd, that house no longer feels like home. I noticed my wife had a doctor's appointment that day, which I used as a chance to pack my things and leave, which I did after organizing my belongings. I left the divorce papers from my lawyer on the kitchen table and walked away. I've blocked my wife and mother's numbers, and any further contact with my wife will go through my lawyer. Currently, I am staying with a friend, hoping to find my own place before Christmas. It's been weeks since I last communicated with my parents. Our final interaction was a text exchange where I tried to explain how my wife's hurtful remarks to the jacket holder affected me deeply. I highlighted her history of such behavior and her knack for keeping secrets. My mother replied that she couldn't speak to me while I was upset and asked me to calm down. She attempted to reach out a few days later, but I ignored the call and blocked her. My disappointment in my parents now feels almost more severe than my wife's initial betrayal. At this point, I doubt I'll ever talk to them again. In difficult times, one expects family to provide strength and support for the aggrieved. Regrettably, my parents have shown themselves to be inadequate. They have made me feel as if I am to blame, as if I am overreacting and causing family discord. But that's not the case. I never demanded the impossible from them, just their assistance in removing my unfaithful wife from our home. They have made their decision. My father also had an opportunity to defend me but chose not to. You make your decisions and you live with the consequences, I guess, in light of feedback. From my earlier posts, some have suggested I am abandoning my efforts too quickly seeking an escape and that I didn't love my wife enough since I didn't try harder to save our marriage. Yet, that isn't accurate. I loved my wife more than anyone else in the world, and her disloyalty crushed me. We all have limits, and once those are exceeded, things can never go back to how they were. Reading those cruel messages changed something in me. I fell out of love with her, as if awakening from an enchantment in a film. Any attempts beyond that point would merely prolong the inevitable. I'm intrigued by how my parents' connection with my wife will evolve now that I'm absent. Will they maintain their support for her despite it complicating their bond with their son? Personally, I'm eager to travel again. My wife wasn't fond of flying, leading us to spend most of our holidays in southern England, in areas such as Newquay, Cornwall, and Devon. It would be thrilling to go overseas once more. The previous time I traveled abroad was when I was 20, on a trip to Greece with friends, which was 13 years ago. I'm excited about the prospect of visiting parts of America once the pandemic eases. That's essentially where I am in life. Let's fast forward to Wednesday, May 26, 2021. It's been over 7 months. I believed I was finished seeking counsel as I had made choices and acted upon them. Yet, a call this morning drew me back into the chaos. I've moved 15 miles away, changed my phone number, and am continuing with my wife's divorce proceedings. She has been unresponsive to my divorce attorney's requests for cooperation, leading to delays. We are now initiating the process to have her officially served by court order. This morning, a friend called to inform me that my father wished to contact me because my mother is seriously ill. He inquired if he could share my new number, to which I consented. My father then called to update me that my mother is hospitalized in a stable yet concerning condition. It shocked me, as it had been a long time since I last heard my father's voice, which carried emotional weight. He mentioned that my mother is eager to see me, asking me to visit her in the hospital tonight. I agreed, and we planned to meet outside the hospital. I left work early as I was too distracted, now feeling anxious and uncertain if my decision was correct. I'm worried I might be dragged back into the disorder I left. This level of anxiety is unprecedented for me, and the lack of control over the situation makes my mind wander in various directions. It feels like I'm entering a burning building blindfolded, uncertain of any escape routes. Why does she want to see me now? Unless there's been a radical change in her character since I left, I find it difficult to believe she's different. Will my wife be there? I have no interest in seeing her. I'm still hurt by the past and their alignment with my unfaithful wife over me. Although I'm debating not going, I've resolved to attend. I also considered suggesting a phone conversation instead, but I'm unsure if she would consent or if she's in a state to talk. It seems I'm cast as the antagonist here, possibly brought on by my departure. On Saturday, May 29th, I did visit the hospital on Wednesday night after much deliberation. I almost didn't go as my courage waned, but I sought closure and knew I'd regret not going. When I arrived at the hospital parking lot, I was paranoid, half expecting my wife to ambush me. I met my father at the entrance, and it was awkward when he tried to hug me, but I declined. I made it clear that if my wife was present, I would leave at once. He confirmed she wasn't there, and we proceeded to my mother's ward. Seeing my mother in such a fragile state startled me. She appeared extremely weak, with a severe black eye and bruises on one side of her face from a nasty fall that resulted in 2 broken ribs, a shattered elbow, and a head injury in that sequence. As she noticed me, her expression shifted from blank to more animated. She expressed her deep miss for me and uncertainty about seeing me again. I reminded her that she could have reached out to me. We discussed the details of her accident and her intentions to mend our relationship. I brought up my wife and the ongoing divorce, explaining my efforts to push it forward, yet she seemed to disregard the notifications. I inquired if my wife was still living at the house, and my mother confirmed she was, which repelled me. She started to describe how my wife was struggling without me and not coping well. It was evident to me that nothing substantial had changed. She hadn't had an epiphany or shifted her perspective. She simply wished for things to return to their previous state. She affirmed that the house remains my home and always will be, yet I disclosed my disinterest. It now harbors only unpleasant memories for me. My visit lasted under an hour in total. Upon departure, I informed my parents that I would contact them if I felt inclined, but they should not anticipate a prompt call. My father inquired whether I would maintain contact as he escorted me out, to which I replied affirmatively, although I'm uncertain about its propriety. Time will reveal the outcome. Once home, my feelings oscillated between sorrow and rage. Nonetheless, I am pleased I made the visit. Thoughts of my wife and her previous significance to me persisted, yet the pain lingers. Reflecting on the past 7 months, it's astonishing to think it's all authentic. The rapidity with which everything fell apart was astounding. Life progresses swiftly, especially when one is inattentive, and I was. It was purely by chance that I uncovered her planned betrayal, a mere twist of fate. I had overlooked the signs and failed to make connections until something on her watch shattered my world. Now, I'm certain this wasn't a solitary incident. At my core, I see her true character and harbor only contempt, not love. Reflecting on the happier moments, it seems they are tarnished and feel as though they belong to another, not me. A friend suggested I see a counselor to help cope with my emotions and past occurrences, which I am considering as I feel somewhat broken internally. The past 7 months have been the most challenging of my life, yet I prefer this awareness over ignorance. I am saddened by the outcomes, but one cannot dictate another's. I suppose the lesson is to learn from this ordeal. I once heard that loyalty is an often underappreciated virtue, and I now understand its value. Perhaps it's overlooked because genuine loyalty often doesn't show itself until it is tested. It isn't a frequent event, but its importance has never been clearer to me. On Tuesday, July 20th, I began the final step of my divorce. My wife signed the papers and sent them to my lawyer, leaving only standard formalities remaining. Through my father, she conveyed her regret for hindering my forward movement, believing she could repair our bond. However, she now recognizes it's not possible, and she must advance for her own benefit. I credited her for this realization. She desires nothing from the divorce and intends to vacate the house once she is stable. I am content with this arrangement. Regarding my mother, I've yet to speak with her, but my father noted she's recuperating well since her hospital discharge and is regaining some routine. The future of our relationship remains uncertain, but I've suggested that if the house is to be mine, they should assign the title to me to provide some stability. We'll then concentrate on repairing our bond. We'll see how it evolves. My primary struggles are internal, dealing with all that has happened. The human mind is both remarkable and daunting. For instance, I vividly remember the taste of truffles I ate at my grandmother's at age 5, which made me vomit, and I have avoided truffles since. Yet, 3 decades later, I can still recall that taste. What I mean to say is, I don't wish to hold on to the memories, emotions, and perspectives of everything that transpired for 30 years. I do not want to become one of those seniors consumed by life's tribulations, where all that remains is anguish. You often hear of such individuals who once seemed kind, compassionate, or witty, yet life's challenges transformed them into people they never envisioned themselves becoming. Only suffering remains. I don't wish to become that person. I must release this pain before it consumes me. I have started therapy and have had conversations with a psychiatrist both via phone and in person, which has greatly aided me in opening up about everything, albeit momentarily. My psychiatrist offered a perspective that struck a chord when I was lamenting about my prime years being over. She said, "Your best years are the years you have left." I think she meant that the past is irreversible. It exists merely in your thoughts, while the present is real, and you have the choice to maximize it instead of dwelling on a past that only exists in your memories. It's a thought I intend to remember whenever I'm down. As I mentioned previously, I have been looking forward to traveling, and it is now becoming a reality. My friend has consented to join me, and we are planning a flight to New York at the beginning of October for a week. I am genuinely thrilled about it, particularly experiencing New York in the autumn, Reminiscent of the movie You've Got Mail, I hope this marks the start of numerous travel adventures in my late 30s. That's the plan. At the very least, what I can say is that for the first time in a long while, I wake up with hope in my heart and approach each day with vigor. If that isn't progress, I don't know what is. On Wednesday, October 27th, it will be a year since my first update, so I felt it fitting to give one final update and close this chapter. To begin, I am now officially divorced. It feels like a burden has been lifted, yet it also signifies a definitive end to what was nearly a third of my life. About a month ago, I unexpectedly ran into my ex-wife for the first time since last December when I entered a store in the town centre. She was exiting the store just as I was entering. Even with masks, I recognized her. Immediately, and our eyes met. She murmured something unclear that I couldn't quite hear. We shared a moment of silence, then I continued into the store. As I browsed, I was overwhelmed by a deep sadness and had to stop to collect myself. It shows that sometimes just one look can revert you back to the beginning. Do I miss her? No, I miss the person I believed she was, but that person no longer exists, if she ever did. I wish her no harm or difficulties. I simply choose no longer to hold bitterness in my heart. It only weighs me down. Regarding Heather, I also learned from a friend's girlfriend that a few years back, she thought she saw my ex-wife outside a bar in the city being intimate with another man. She never mentioned it to me or my friend at the time because she wasn't certain it was her and did not want to interfere. I'm quite upset with her because knowing this earlier might have saved me a lot of grief. It isn't conclusive proof, but it could have helped me verify whether she was out that night, which might have spared me considerable anguish. Now I see why I've never really liked her. One of the reasons my friend and I decided to book a flight to New York in October, besides wanting to experience the city in full, was the hope that the travel ban between the USA and UK for fully vaccinated travelers would be lifted in September. Regrettably, it was postponed until November 8th, leaving our plans in limbo. Additionally, my friend cannot take time off from work until the new year, so if I go, I might have to go alone, although we both wish to travel together. I am inclined to wait until the new year to travel with him, but I'll need to give it more thought. This pandemic continues to bring unforeseen challenges, so I can't complain or say I'm surprised. I'll make it there one way or another. This is simply the start of my journey. Regarding my parents, I've experienced apathy towards them, and feeling anything beyond that has been challenging. My father has attempted to repair our bond, yet I find myself not caring anymore. This may seem harsh, but it is the truth. Previously, I mentioned wanting them to transfer the house into my name, yet I have not followed through. Initially, I believed this was just an outburst of anger, an effort to gain some leverage at the start of our discussions, but now I truly have no interest in that property. I would prefer to live in the house from Nightmare on Elm Street than in theirs. It wouldn't change anything. It cannot turn back time or change the decisions they have made. It's merely the unfortunate result of those decisions. To those thinking about forgiving an unfaithful partner, I advise against it. You are engaging in a hopeless endeavor. Don't be the one frantically trying to extinguish the flames ignited by your unfaithful partner while they joyously spark them again, after everything that has happened and after. Exploring various infidelity support forums for a year, I have never felt stronger. Not cutting your losses only prolongs the agony. A relevant incident happened earlier this year when I accidentally caught my trouser leg on a metal bin at work. I didn't notice it had sliced me until I got home, and that evening I felt strange. At 2 a.m. my leg was pulsing. I was feeling extremely ill with blurry vision, dizziness and feverish shivers. Fearing it was sepsis, I called for an ambulance, but they told me it would be over 2 hours due to it being a Friday night during the COVID pandemic. My thoughts were racing and I started to breathe heavily. Strangely, the only comfort I found was in accepting that I might die. After that realization, my fear vanished. I've been pondering this lately, and it mirrors the experience with deceit and betrayal. You have to accept that it's done, it's ended. If someone can deceive you so deeply, is it worth continuing a losing battle? Is it worth the agony? I think not. I realize everyone has different situations, especially those with children, but some fights are pointless. Realizing it's finished brings clarity. That's my stance. It's only after we lose everything that we're truly free to do anything, as Tyler Durden remarked in Fight Club. It's interesting I haven't opened up about my thoughts and feelings like this since high school. I work on roofs for a living, but this situation has uncovered a side of me I had neglected. If anything positive emerged from this chaos, it's that I will no longer suppress my emotions. Writing has been a healing process, and I will continue it, even if only in a journal. There are times in life when outcomes hang in the balance, capable of tipping either way. I shudder at what might have occurred had I not sought assistance or encountered those dog walkers. I could have found myself in a grim situation, drunk and furious. I'm just thankful I survived without causing harm to myself or others. Betrayal causes profound and intrusive thoughts. Being betrayed by those close to you is a uniquely intense and emotionally taxing experience. I feel both diminished and fortified after everything. What do you think of today's story? For me, it's quite engaging with potential for multiple twists, but it unfolded as it did. Please share your thoughts about the story in the comments. See you in the next video.